Can you tell us what was really in the most recent border bill that Kamala keeps citing over and over? And I think it's a compelling argument if you don't know the truth. It's a very, very good argument if you don't know the truth, which is why no one wants to tell the truth. So her argument is, we actually wanted to fix the border. I put together a comprehensive border bill that the Border Patrol supported. Trump was against it. He told his lackeys in the Senate, Ron Johnson included, to vote against it because he doesn't want to fix the problem. He wants to run on the problems, and I want solutions. And I think that's a compelling argument if you're ignorant. So what was actually in that border bill that you were against it?
Well, first of all, this was a political malpractice on an epic scale by Mitch McConnell. To take an issue that the public supports us 80% on, securing the border, and go into secret negotiations, not even tell the conference what he was negotiating. We didn't find out till a week before they dropped that bill because I called a conference to finally flesh out what's in that bill. Once we found out, our jaws dropped, and here was what was in the bill. It basically codified 40 to 50% of Joe Biden's open border policy, actually a higher percentage than that. It's been about 9,000 people a day. If you count the getaways that have entered this country under Joe Biden or have been encountered trying to get in this country illegally, 9,000 a day.
It's 3.3 million a year.
Obama declared a crisis at 2,000 a day, right? So what this bill did is it said, well, if you hit 4,000 a day encounters, the president has discretion to stop processing asylum claims, okay? 5,000 becomes mandatory. So that's the crux of it right there. You codify 4,000 to 5,000 people a day when Obama called it 2,000 was a crisis, okay? And by Congress passing the law, you would actually weaken the authority the president actually had. In 2018, the Supreme Court ruled that current law exudes deference to the president in terms of handling the border. President Trump used that executive authority to close the border. Biden used that executive authority to open it up. So he had the authority. We would have been happy to strengthen the authority, to change the credible fear standard closer to what actual asylum requirements are, which are very tough, by the way. There are very few people, less than 10% of the people coming into this country have a valid asylum claim. But we let them in because if they're just afraid of going back, all they have to say is, I'm afraid to go back. Oh, okay, come on in. And you're in Lake Flint. I mean, you're never going to go get sent home, by and large. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So, again, it was an awful, awful bill. McConnell apparently got the Border Patrol to endorse it because the Border Patrol's drowning. They're looking for any port in the storm. Okay, I talked to Brandon Judd afterwards. He knew what an awful bill it was, but he said, Ron, plus there's obviously resources for Border Patrol. So, again, it was horrific.
Yep.
When
did you get a phone? When did you get a phone call from Donald Trump telling you to be against it?
I'm not aware of any Republican senator that Donald Trump called. He obviously spoke out against the bill because it's so awful. But no, we had the week to leak out, and people leaked out what was in that bill. When they introduced it by Sunday, it was dead on arrival. It never had a chance. So McConnell comes in that Monday realizing that this bill that he negotiated, he used James Langford, but it was McConnell's bill. His staff was in the room. Okay, that was his negotiated bill. He knew it was so awful. He comes into conference on Monday, goes, colleagues, the politics have changed. We have a political, we have a nominee now, and he doesn't like the bill. So I'm going to recommend we vote against cloture. All McConnell's, from my standpoint, all McConnell's trying to do is deflect the blame from himself to Trump. Trump was happy to take credit for tanking that awful bill. Unfortunately, it's been used against him. But so I just laid out the truth. It was an awful bill negotiated by McConnell. It was dead on arrival. I'm not aware of any Republican senator, and I've said this repeatedly, nobody's come up to me and said, hey, Ron, I did get a call from Trump. So I don't think Trump called anybody, spoke out against it, but we were all speaking out against it, except for the few, the guy who negotiated it and a couple rhinos voted for it. But by the way, was it 6 or 8 Democrats vote against it?
Yeah. We talked to Bernie Moreno yesterday, and he said, vote for me so we can fire Chuck Schumer. And it's like, also so we can get rid of Mitch McConnell. let's get a real Senate leader in there. You hosted a House Judiciary Committee hearing, or there was, a House Judiciary Committee yesterday on the effects of the border on Wisconsin about this. And I don't know, did you talk about the Canadian border with Wisconsin, or just the Mexican one? You were a witness at this hearing. What was learned at this hearing?
Yeah, so what I did is I laid out the history of how we got to this crisis. And, the catalyst of all this was Obama's lawless Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, DACA, where he took prosecutorial discretion, which was supposed to be meted out on an individual case basis and granted to over 1 million people. That changed the landscape. That's where Central America was, American law has changed. Now you get a permiso, notice to appear. But now you get permission to go into America. That's what sparked all this. So I laid out that history. And then we had a really good panel of, local law enforcement, a mom and dad who lost a son to one counterfeit thousands of pain pills laced with fentanyl, died alone in his room in college. I mean, just horrific things. Most of what we're seeing here relates to drugs. We don't have a huge migrant population, but, one particular example is in Whitewater, city of about 15,000. They've got an influx of about 1,000 Nicaraguans who don't speak, the Spanish that bilingual teachers speak. So it's costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars for other interpreters. It's overwhelming the education system and the law enforcement. And that's just one example. In one little town in Wisconsin, multiply that across the country. In large and small cities or across the country, 5.7 million people released, another 2 million gotaways, 7.8 million people, okay? That 38 states have populations less than 7.8 million people. That's the magnitude of the problem. And within that population, you have criminals, the rapes, the vehicular homicides, the murders. But you've got transnational criminals, you've got terrorists, you've got gang and cartel members. And those gangs in Central America are brutal. They have no respect for life. I mean, the rapes, the murders, your police officer, they're going to send you a DVD with the video of your wife and children going to school, going to church. Just a slight little warning. Probably offer you a bribe. If you don't take the bribe, they'll harm your family. If you're a cab driver, you either pay their extortion or they put a bullet in your head and set your cab on fire. And then most other cab drivers start paying the extortion. So we're not used to that kind of brutality. We're not used to that level of gang crime. And yet the mainstream media, Martha Raddatz, when J.D. Vance was on her show, saying, well, it's only a handful of apartment buildings that this Venezuelan gang's taken over. It's like, J.D. Vance, it's like, Martha, are you listening to yourself? A handful of apartments?
That's my favorite news clip ever.
That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, nothing's better than that clip. We played a little bit of J.D. Vance on Theo Vaughn's podcast the other day. And Theo Vaughn even is like, hey, listen, if there were people in Mexico shooting 70,000 people a year, like literal shots fired into America, killing 70,000 people, which is how many people die from fentanyl, then we would do something about it. I'm looking at some polls here. The Real Clear Politics average. This is interesting. So the two-way race has, so just Kamala versus Trump's up 0.2. But then I guess these are old. Those are new, but they have a five-way race. Is that like? I guess there is no five-way race anymore. But it had Trump up 3. But those are older polls. Those are from like July. So let's just do the ones that have it basically tied. What's up with Wisconsin? What are we doing, Ron?
Yeah.
How are we going to win this?
Well, it's going to be close, and isn't that insane? I mean, what to what extent are people's eyes closed? I mean, I guess they listen to legacy and corporate media, right, that are covering up for the Democrats. But I keep saying in a sane world with an unbiased media, these elections wouldn't even be close. I mean, how bad does it have to get? I mean, 40-year high inflation, open border, a clear and present danger to this nation, a war on fossil fuel driving up the cost of energy and everything else. A weakened America that our enemies abroad notice, and so the world's on fire. I mean, how much more damage does Democrat governance have to wreak on this country before a large majority of Americans wake up and say, we got to kick these bums out? And these people need to be defeated forever. But unfortunately, we have a highly biased media, and it's an insane world right now, and this election is going to be close. So again, if your eyes are awake and you understand, the peril this nation's in, you got to do more than vote. You got to get everybody to vote. Get out, vote early, so that we can devote all of our get the vote efforts to low propensity voters that will decide this election. I mean, this is call to action here. You can't sit on the sidelines and go, I did my part. I voted. It's not enough.
Tell me about this foreign influence potential on U.S. elections.
Well, so we got briefed by the FBI and the Director of National Intelligence a couple of weeks ago, and secure briefing. Nothing in there classified. And it's as Mike Lee said, I left the briefing with him, quoting Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. It's like, duh. So China, Russia, they're trying to impact our politics. Like, duh. They've always tried to do that. What I asked, I was the last one asking the question. They shut down the hearing after I asked this question. So, well, what are you doing about smurfing? I mean, there's real potential foreign influence. I mean, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in to like organizations like Act Blue, who divvy these massive donations up into $5, $10, $15 donations for the benefit of Democrat politicians like Tammy Baldwin and Kamala Harris. And FBI director looked clueless. They had nothing to say. Now, that would be real foreign influence, right? Funneling millions and millions of dollars into the campaign coffers. They're not, according to, again, the DNI was right there. She didn't open her mouth about that. And then, by the way, then they shut the briefing down because my next question was going to be about what are you doing about illegal immigrants voting? We have all this evidence of them being registered, sometimes without their knowledge. I mean, are you doing anything about that? That's against the law. Democrats are saying, we're against the SAVE Act because it's already illegal to vote if you're a non-citizen. Yeah, well, are you doing anything to enforce the law? And didn't even get to that question because the Democrat who was in charge of the briefing shut it down because didn't want to subject the FBI director and the director of the DNI to have to answer those questions.
Even in a classified briefing, they couldn't be normal people and talk freely in a classified briefing?
No, I mean, no. Listen, they do not. They're not accountable to the American public. They're not accountable to Congress. They just come in and give us a song and dance. They didn't tell us real information. There's nothing I heard in that briefing that should have been classified. There's nothing really of particular interest in that briefing. Like you say, it's like, China and Russia are trying to influence our elections. Duh.